Hi, I'm Zach.
And I'm Diana.
And we are The Farrier's Bellows, a podcast dedicated to bringing you games and tools to take your adventures further.
We're going to be talking about non-traditional indie RPGs, some that have been around for years, others that are newer, to take you beyond the ordinary. Today,
join us as we prepare for our dark journey in Witch, the Road to Lindisfarne. Our first segment is the call to adventure. Witch, the Road to Lindisfarne was designed and written by Kevin Barthoud and Richard Lacey, with art by Johnny Gray. It was published in 2012 by Pompeii Crew Design, and it is a dark horror vignette game, sort of a travelogue game where you are making your way across a map and telling short vignette scenes as you go. It is a GM-less and diceless game about a witch who has been condemned to death, along with the people forced to escort her to her execution. It's a story-heavy, psychological horror game.
At the start of the game, you pick a character sheet, and these character sheets are, they come with the game, they're prefab, and each character has a role in the party, and they have their kind of, like, their own prompts and their own sort of storyline before you even get them. And so this sheet is going to give you your traits, it's going to give you 3 questions that other characters are going to help you answer, and it's going to have some scene ideas. However, if you're the witch, you've got some different stuff on your sheet. It kind of gives you the rundown of how to play as the witch. The game is split into acts. It's got 4 acts, a beginning and an epilogue, in addition to the 4 acts, obviously. And the group is moving from London to the Holy Land, the holy island of Lindisfarne. And those are part of the acts. In each act, every player creates a scene before you move on to the next one. Every single player has to create a scene, which is why your character sheet will have some scene ideas for you to kind of move forward. Each location also has a specific prompt or task that every character has to kind of go through before the scenes are even framed. And when you reach the end of the game, every player must decide if they will go through with the execution or they won't. And they have to discover whether or not the witch was really guilty.
Yeah, it's a short game of sort of exploring guilt and exploring what people will do when they are pushed. One more thing about the scene framings is that each player has a lot of freedom for their scenes, except for the witch, Eloise, who very frequently has very specific goals or very specific setups for their scenes. And yeah, it really flies in terms of the structure for scenes.
Absolutely.
So, Diana, what did you like about this game?
I really liked the simplicity of the character sheets. They are half sheets, but they're not half sheet hamburger style. They're half sheet hot dog style, if you remember elementary art class, which I think is fun. I feel like they're a fun half sheet in a different way. There's maybe a paragraph on them total of words. There's not a lot on there. So you can really build this character. They give you the foundations and you can really build this character how you'd like, which I think is really interesting. I really like the pretty artwork on it. I just really like the simplicity of the character sheet.
Yeah, so the character sheets have character art by Johnny Gray that is really dark, really evocative, really gives you a feel for these characters. And other than that, it's basically traits that your character possess, some questions that your character is trying to answer through play, and then some ideas for scenes. That's
it.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the art really because it's gorgeous. It's really good.
Is there anything that you liked?
Yeah. I really like that the different mechanics that Eloise's player engages in each act. I think it is an interesting way of setting Eloise apart from the rest of the group. And it also does a good job of... Eloise's player is not quite a GM. They are still very much a player in the sort of traditional sense. But they do have a little bit of extra power in an interesting way. It's an interesting power dynamic in which you are completely at the mercy of the other players, but have specific powers in terms of being able to manipulate or see into or give narrative control over their past and their histories. So the way that Eloise's scenes are framed is really powerful and interesting to me.
It was scary. I didn't pick Luis because it was so scary to me. Like, that was so scary to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, like intimidating.
Yeah.
I thought you meant scary as in the horror game.
No. Oh God, no. That's a very different thing. No, intimidating. It intimidated me.
Yes, and I could see that. I could see that being intimidating to maybe newer players. I think we'll talk about whether or not we think this is a game for new players.
Yeah, we'll address that later.
But yeah, I can see it. I could see it being intimidating.
Completely not at all related to what you just said. I really like the ability of this game to run as long as you want it to. If you want this to be a short game, it is a 2.5 hour long game. Done. But if you want this to be a longer game, if you want this to be a 4 hour game, it can be a 4 hour game because it's got such simple rules and it's so improv heavy. You can really expand on your scenes and make them as detailed and as involved as you would like and make this game last as long as you want it to. And I really like that. I really like that you can kind of sort of customize this game for your time frame and for the kind of game you'd like to play.
Yeah, that's something I like about vignette games in general. I could really see with a group of really heavy role players and people who are really comfortable with improv just taking these scenes and running them. But if you have 2.5 hours to play a game and you just want to, frame your scenes, narrate a little bit, and then move on, it works equally as well that way. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
One little bit of mechanical thematic things that I really liked was at the end, every player has to narrate from the book how they are complicit and how they are active, actually, in Eloise's burning. And you read it from the book, and you have to say, though it means her death at the end. So it's this ritual confirmation that you are taking part in this, you are actively taking part in this, and you know what you're doing. And it hit really hard, I thought, at the table.
Absolutely.
Making every player, except for the one player who refused, say out loud, though it means her death, knowing that this is the choice they made and this is what they were going to do.
Yeah. And I think we've discussed on this podcast kind of the impact of rituals before. Yeah, we have. With Grey Ranks, we talked about it, the ritual of reading. Yeah. They make a huge, huge difference in these story games, and having to make that decision and having to read that line really brought home what we were doing.
Yeah.
And it was just a really cool thing to experience. Along that line, I really liked that that the whole game is the whole journey is you deciding both, is Eloise guilty and does she deserve to be lit on fire? You have to decide that. And that's an internal struggle that every character had to kind of go through. And I super enjoyed that. I thought that was, enjoyed is the right word. In like a dark sense.
Yeah. I think
not like it wasn't fun. That's not a fun thing, but it was satisfying.
We talked during Grey Ranks about the difference between enjoying something that is dour and serious and having fun at the expense of that serious thing.
Right.
And I could definitely see, having not played one of the people leading Eloise to her death, really enjoying that internal struggle. Did you personally struggle with it a lot? So you played Ham, the guide. The guide.
Yep.
Did you personally find yourself struggling a lot? Because it seemed to me I was trying so hard to win you over, and I just couldn't get it.
So I played Ham a little bit more villainous than I had set out to play Ham, but Ham didn't know. I don't think Ham could decide. I think sometimes he thought yes and sometimes he thought no, and he kind of went back and forth because he went back and forth a couple times. So yeah, Diana had a very different struggle than Ham did, but I think Ham struggled. He was an interesting character. That's a personal discussion. We'll have that later. But
he was a weirdo.
He was a weirdo.
You really leaned into
weird
him being just weird.
I did.
Asking inscrutable questions.
Yep.
Jumping back and forth. It was an experience.
It was an experience, and I am so sorry I made you sit through it.
No. I thought it was good. I thought in a lot of ways you were incorporating the things on the sheet, just in your own way. Which is something that I like about the game, right? Yeah. That it gives you this very clear jumping off point for each character.
Yeah.
And it's up to the player to interpret how to take those jumping off points.
Right.
Which we will talk about a little bit more later. I want to agree. The whole premise to me is golden. I love this concept of playing travelers on this dark journey and dealing with the conflicting nature of whether or not what you're doing is right.
Yeah.
I think the premise for this, the setup for this, is fascinating. It's really interesting. A few months ago for a work project, I was reading a lot about the Salem witch trials and just learning about how affected people were by this need to blame someone for the misfortunes that they are either experiencing or perceiving, and especially taking those misfortunes or taking those frustrations and that hatred out on the marginalized, the people who can't fight back. Seeing that explored in this game in this way, I thought was very interesting, and I really love the concept.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you had questions about?
Yes. We played with 4 people, but you can play with 6 people.
Yes.
And there were 2 additional characters that we did not play with, but those characters could be a part of your game, and they are not included in the book at all. The way that the acts work is that one of the players reads a little description about what's going on, a kind of scene setting. And each one of us had like an act, a scene, a page to read. There was nothing for those additional 2 characters to read.
But those characters are included in Absolution.
Which is nice. That's really nice, but they're not included in the acts. So they don't get, I don't know, they don't get to read. They don't get to set the scene for the whole table. I was just confused about that.
Yeah, they don't have an opportunity because there's only 4 acts and the game is made for it seems like it's optimized for 4 players. It does not seem like it is optimized for the 6. So they do have less to do. Yeah. And I wonder what it would be like to play as one of them.
Right. I don't know. Reading and setting up an act helped me get into the game more. Not that I wasn't into the game, but it really just made me dive into it a little bit more. And if I was one of those characters, I would just be along for the ride. I don't know.
I have a question on how to incorporate magical elements without immediately making yourself look like the witch. So a big part of the game is trying to determine whether or not Eloise is actually guilty of witchcraft or not. A lot of the scene framings, or a fair amount of the scene suggestions, have magical elements to them. A corpse hanging from a tree speaking. A lot of Eloise's suggestions for how to frame scenes are based around her having knowledge that she maybe not could have. Other people are able to frame dark magical things, and I wonder how you incorporate that without immediately painting a huge sign on Eloise's back, right? It feels difficult to me to try to incorporate these dark magical elements while still maintaining a sense of Eloise's innocence.
Yeah. We had long conversations about whether or not magic exists and how that changes the game. And I made a different argument, but I don't think any of those conversations address this. How do you incorporate her stuff and not make yourself look like a witch? I don't know.
My last question is, how do we not make Brother Armand a devil worshiper? So in prepping to play this, I listened to the Gauntlet podcast talk about their experiences with Witch, The Road to Lindisfarne. And they mentioned that in both games that they had played, Brother Armand turned out to be a devil worshiper. So I kind of, we scheduled this game and we went into it and I bit my tongue and I didn't mention it because I wanted to see what would happen with the player who chose Brother Armand. And sure enough, by the end of the game, Brother Armand was a secret Satanist who was trying to get Eloise out so that she could rule his coven. What is it about Brother Armand that makes people want to turn him into a Satan worshiper, and why does it keep happening?
I don't know, because that's not it's not at all how I would play him.
Really?
I would have played him with the secret love child.
Really?
That's how I would have played him.
That's so interesting to me.
I would have made him, I would have made him based on real life religious people who were, there were several father-son popes. Several of them.
Yeah.
That is a real thing.
So we've talked a lot lately about genre literacy, and I'm wondering if that comes from genre expectations, right?
Yeah.
The way you think about a Catholic priest with a dark secret is obviously much different than the way our friend, who is very into the occult, very into Satanism as a theme, is going to engage with things. And I wonder if it's just that, dark fantasy role players are going to lean into that. People who have a lot of literacy with dark fantasy as a genre are going to go, oh yes, for sure he's a demon worshiper, because that's what I have genre literacy and that's what I have interest in.
Right.
Whereas yours might be a little bit more mundane evil, or maybe even not mundane evil, right? Because it doesn't say anywhere that he's evil.
No, it doesn't. So his questions are, why do you doubt that she's a witch? What dark secret does another character know about you? And why were you chosen? None of those say, how come you worship the devil?
Yeah.
I don't understand. And none of the scene ideas are terribly religious or anti being a monk.
Yeah.
None of them.
It is interesting to me. It was only interesting to me insofar as someone else saw a pattern and then our game fell into that pattern.
Right.
And because this game runs on prefabricated characters, I think that is a concern when it comes to, well, how many different types of stories are we going to be able to tell with this game?
Right.
My question is, how do we not make Brother Armand a devil worshiper? But the big question is, how do you get more out of these characters? How do you get the most out of these characters?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's probably the biggest question, because I share that question with you.
Anything else that stood out to you?
I mean, nothing different, just really the simplicity of this game. And I talked about it a little before, but this is a very easy game to explain. This is absolutely, with the correct group of people, definitely a game you can pick up and play whenever. You need it. It needs to be with the correct group of people. I don't think you could play this game with people who are brand new to role-playing games. I don't think you could do that. So? I don't think so. I think this game relies we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but this game is all about improv. And people who are new to gaming might struggle with that. I am not new to gaming, and I struggle with improv. I think if you were new to gaming and you were new to this experience, having to improv every part of this game, there's no downtime. There is nothing for you to roll the dice on. There is nothing for you to be like, okay, this is the mechanical thing that happens. This is all improv, and that can be really scary to someone who's new to role-playing games. But with the right group of people, this is a phenomenal game to just bust out.
Yeah.
You've got 2.5 hours. Let's just play.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with that, the conciseness of the game itself. I also really like how small the book is.
Yeah.
It's a very short book. It's a quick read. It requires absolutely zero prep. It's a total of, I want to say, the page numbers are in Roman numerals that I just noticed. So if I can count, that is about 20 pages of quote unquote rules that you do not have to read beforehand, because most of it you are reading at the table as part of the game.
Right.
It's very handheld. It's very portable. I wonder if this is not necessarily a great game for new players. Is it a good con game?
Yeah.
You think? Would you play with this with people at a con?
I would. I want to be very careful about how I phrase this.
They're going to take the role play seriously?
They're going to take role-playing games seriously. They might not take this particular game super seriously, because I have played at cons. So they might not take this game very seriously. But I do think if you are serious about role-playing games, that you could play this at a con. I
agree. Yeah. I think I would.
Yeah.
It would be maybe scary.
It would be an experience.
Yeah.
I think it would definitely be an experience.
It would require me to go into that with a lot of trust, I think. Especially because I think this game probably does work best when you take it seriously.
Yeah.
I think all games work best when you take them seriously and you want to engage with them as they're intended to be engaged with.
Right.
I do not find any joy in trying to break games.
Right.
But I think this especially, if you don't go into it with the intention of interacting with it sincerely,
right,
it's not going to work.
I agree.
You're not going to get anything out of it.
I agree. And you can interact with it sincerely without going really deep into the witchcraft and stuff. Like, you can change your level of deepness, but you do have to take it seriously. Absolutely. And so now we start our third segment, Approach the Inmost Cave.
We talked a little bit about what we wanted to discuss for this section for Witch: The Road to Lindisfarne, because there is a lot going on with Witch. And we talked a little bit about, did we want to talk about how this game explores religious extremism? Did we want to talk about how it explores misogyny or persecution? In the end, and I do want to come back to this, but I feel very uncomfortable talking about how this game talks about misogyny because of the fact that the people burning Eloise might be right in the game. And that is still something I've had a lot of difficulty wrapping my head around, is the game itself condemning misogyny and persecution when one of the results of the game is you burn the witch and save England.
Is one of the results you burn the witch and you save England? Or is it you burn the witch and the bad things that were happening stop happening? That they don't necessarily need. So this is the conversation that we kept having. Like, she might not actually be a witch. She just might be someone who engaged in witchcraft.
No, because at the start of the game, Eloise's player decides did she engage in witchcraft? She decides, am I guilty of the Black Plague? Is what you decide.
Okay.
As Eloise's player.
Yeah.
So I have not quite reconciled how that works or what that says about this game. I think it is a very complex view of that, and I think you can absolutely explore those issues with this game.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Would you feel differently about this game if, instead of you saying, am I guilty of the plague, if you said, am I guilty of practicing witchcraft?
Yes.
If that was the question that you were answering, would you feel differently?
Yeah, I think so, because that would leave it open to witchcraft just being a harmless folk religion.
Yeah.
That would solve this problem for sure. I think this game would be sending a very clear message to me personally about these issues if it was just practicing witchcraft or not.
Right.
Because then I think it would make the characters' decisions much more complex. Because after you reveal at the very end, your characters would have to, or you as players and your characters would have to reconcile, well, is practicing witchcraft worth being put to death in this universe, right? Is that actually the cause of the Black Plague or not?
Right.
And I think that, to me, would make that statement or that issue a lot clearer. I just think, I feel like that gets muddied when you can save the day by killing this girl.
Yeah.
I think that really muddies the water in a way that I'm not entirely comfortable with.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we solved that.
I did not mean to throw that wrench in. It just kind of, the idea popped in, and so I wanted to share.
No, you didn't solve you didn't throw a wrench in it at all. You solved it for me.
Diana to the rescue.
The thing we really wanted to end up talking about was how this game does party conflict.
Right.
Because it does fantastically, and
regardless of what happens at the end or what the witch is guilty of or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So traditionally, there aren't that many games that are centered around party conflict. All games feature party conflict.
Right.
I don't know if I can think of a game that doesn't have party conflict in some form, but I am harder pressed to think of a significant amount of games that are centered around party conflict, are about pitting characters against one another.
Right.
This has changed a little bit, especially with story games, where you see this a little bit more, because they can be self-contained. They can be about people who have their own agendas, fighting for their own self-interests. But the market is still one that's largely about ensemble casts working together with moments of inter-party conflict.
Yep.
Usually, most ensemble games have rules that are extension of the basic rules for interacting with NPCs in order to engage in party conflict. But games like Witch are all about party conflict. It is all about envisioning your character, thinking about what is important to them, and then explicitly pitting it against other players. And I think Witch does this really expertly. I think one of the ways that it does this is through the pre-made characters, right? Kevin Barthoud and Richard Lacey have designed these characters to be in contact with one another, to have conflicting interests, to have their own goals. And they've done that through the traits that they've given these characters, the questions that these characters have about themselves, these very leading questions that are about other people on the journey and involve things that are going to throw you in conflict, that are going to get the wheels in your mind spinning about conflict. It also helps that this is a very strict setting and scenario, I think. These short defined acts with guiding prompts for scenes give us something that allows us to feel comfortable fighting against one another in a set space. It reminds me a little bit of Kagematsu, in which we had an end goal, right, for each scene. we have an end goal for this story. We know that no matter what, Eloise is going to end up at Lindisfarne, and she's going to be tied up on the pyre.
Right.
So we know that with each of these acts, we're able to go into the scene, play around in that scene, and no matter what we do, we have an end goal in mind. We have a shared end goal. So we can really push that party conflict and explore trying to get our own way. So what this results in is the game setting up this environment for the characters to interact, very explicitly and pointedly pitting them against one another in certain areas, raising their hackles and putting everyone on their guard.
Right.
And then just lets them loose.
One of the ways that this game does this is, in the beginning, one of the first things you have to do is everybody has to read their questions. And some of these questions are exactly pitting you against another character. They are setting up the dynamics of the party before the party even does anything. And I thought that when we were playing it, I thought that was really, really interesting. And it helped me figure out not just my job in the party, but my social role in the party, because Ham doesn't have any questions that relate to anybody else. Everybody else has questions that relate to everybody else, but Ham doesn't. He's an outsider. He doesn't know what's going on. He's just the guide. And I played a very creepy one. So I just think I think the game, by doing that, the game is setting you up to work against each other, to work with each other, to be in conflict.
Yeah. And it's also putting the player of Eloise in a certain position of need and also power, right? She obviously needs to be freed. She cannot free herself.
Right.
She needs to convince the others to free her. As Eloise's player, you have a very clear goal. You also have a lot of scene framing power, and you also have the power of knowledge over all the other characters.
Right.
So there's this very visceral countdown clock as you're going to Lindisfarne, where as Eloise's player, you're thinking, I need to get them to do what I want. I need to get them to do specifically what I want.
Right.
And trying to find ways to do it. And I was explicitly trying to hit on all y'all's buttons or what I thought might work. And it was a lot of fun, prodding around and saying, okay, is this going to work with you? Is this going to, no? Okay. All right. I'm going to try going back to Brother Armand, and because I know I can hit on his pity,
right,
and he might be able to get Ham to work with me a little bit more.
Right.
And I can promise Ham money because I know that's what's going to motivate him.
Right.
Eloise has this power to stir the pot and play on the friction between the characters in order to try to meet her own ends. And obviously, each character has been assigned this job or hired to make sure she is burned. But between the ways that the characters distrust or dislike one another and their own motivations and desires, Eloise has this ability to exacerbate that to her own gain.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about it earlier, but you did try to do that.
I tried really hard and I failed.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you think could have swayed your character?
I mean, money. I was swayed.
I offered you a chest of Templar gold.
And I was going to let you go if you had support. We were on an island and no one else was supporting you. You should have thought about that when you set up your previous scenes.
Yes. And yes. That's true. And I think that's one of the things that this game really relies on that I think we should have leaned into a lot more was not keeping secrets.
Right.
So the game even says on page 5, show the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs of your character. Even if details would be hidden from other characters, show the players. Only the truth about Eloise should remain mysterious until the end of the game.
We did not lean into that at all.
We didn't.
Yeah.
And I think our game suffered for it.
Yeah.
I think this is a game where if your character if you know the answer to one of your questions and you are plotting behind the scenes, you need to tell the table that, because those are elements that everyone can incorporate.
Right.
It's really important, I think. And part of that goes against what you would think the spirit is of this competitive party conflict thing, right? Because if the players know the secrets, they're going to use them to win. But I think if you're buying into that party conflict and you, the player, can disassociate the knowledge you have of the character story from the knowledge your character would have.
Right. But it's that skill that I think makes this game unsuitable for new players. It's that being able to dissociate your player from your character. I think that's a skill you learn.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
The more you practice it, the better you get at it, and I think it's a skill you learn. And so I don't think this is that's one of the reasons I don't think that this is a good game for brand new players.
Yeah. Just to illustrate, I think what would have made that so strong is one of the reasons it sounds like I couldn't get you to side with me was because there was other people at the at the burning site.
You had no support. I was not going to fight to get you out.
Well, I shot myself in the foot by Eloise gets a foreshadowing scene where she gets to foreshadow something ahead. Gets to set a scene with people and things that the group has not yet encountered.
Right.
So me, being a fool, narrated this scene where a rider took a letter to the monks and cardinal at Lindisfarne.
Right.
And we didn't know what was in the letter. We didn't know what the letter contained. It was just a scene to show that there were priests at Lindisfarne, and they were waiting for us. And had I known that our monk, our brother Armand, was a member of a secret Satan worshipping cult within the church, we could have worked together to, I think, make something really satisfying.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Could you imagine if our Knight Templar had discovered that he had secretly walked into the center of a satanic cult and had to fight his way out, and how Ham would have reacted? I think the more open you are with answering your questions and the secrets that your character has, the more open you are at the table, the more you can make that conflict shine within the world of the fiction.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I do think that if we had been more forthcoming with kind of the backstory that honestly, if we had just been more forthcoming with the backstory that we had created for each of our characters, it would have made for a very different playthrough.
I think so too. I think there's a difference between playing competitively, which I think in a lot of ways is what we did, and playing a game to tell a story of conflict. Right. Yeah. And when you're telling a story of conflict, the best thing you can do is get everybody on the same page of why they're conflicted. And to its credit, Witch told us to do that.
We just didn't.
Just in play, we kind of dropped it by the wayside. We were exploring our characters. We were trying to figure out things about our characters along the way. And I think it just kind of got lost in the madness of the journey. Yeah. Is there anything you want to say about your experience putting me to death and me being completely unable to sway you?
You weren't completely unable to sway me. I want to be clear about this. You were not completely unable to sway me. You just did not have a strong enough argument for me.
Teutonic gold. A chest of
Templar gold. How was I supposed to believe you? You were in a cage.
That's true.
If you had all that gold, why were you in a cage?
I know. I should have done a better job of pitting you against the knight. Oh, man. So many mistakes. Our next segment is, I wonder what would happen if. What are some changes that you would be curious to see how they would play out in this game?
So I've talked about it numerous times. I do not feel very comfortable with vignette games. Improv is not, I know I play role-playing games, but improv is not something I feel terribly comfortable with. I feel like I need boundaries. I feel like I need dice to roll to help me go forward with my improv. I just feel like I need more than just a blank slate and someone saying go for it. So when in Grey Ranks, when someone else framed your scenes for you, I just felt like those boundaries had been in place, so I had an easier time kind of playing in that world. So I wonder what would happen if other players framed your scenes, especially since those players want to win you to their side, or they want to completely dissuade you or kill you or whatever. Especially since this game is all about party conflict, it would be very interesting, I think, to have the other players set your scene for you and make you participate in this world that they might not be in the scene for.
Yeah, I like that. I think that would be an interesting way to look at. A, I think it would be easier to incorporate creepy elements without necessarily putting a target on your back.
Yep.
And B, I think it it takes a little bit of the stress off of you as a character, because you're not framing your scene and acting it out. You're either responding to someone else's frame, or you're tossing a frame at somebody else and saying, hey, here, what's going on?
Right. When you have to create your own scene and then you have to act in that scene, you are making all of the decisions, all of them. And that's just way too intimidating for me. And so I just wonder what would happen if someone else framed your scenes.
Yeah. I wonder what would happen if we made our own characters. Yeah. There is not a terrible lot to the characters as it is. Like we've said, it's basically a name, a role, 3 questions, 3 general traits like anxious, tired, cranky, and leading questions that connect the characters to one another. I think it would be fairly easy, to create your own party. I don't know if you could each do individual character creation. I don't think that would... No, that's not true. I think you could make that work.
Yeah.
I don't think it would sing quite as well, in the sense that I do think Kevin Barthod and Richard Lacey put a lot of work into making sure that these characters had overlap. But I don't know. I don't think it's impossible.
So the way that... Because I've thought about this. Mainly because I just don't feel like I played Ham as well as I could have played him. And it's because I interpreted him one way immediately based on everything that was there. I didn't feel like I had a lot of wiggle room. If I was going to create new character sheets or whatever, right? Like, I would have just made a list and you have to pick from that list, right? Same character sheets, same basic premise. You're not creating characters from scratch, but like, just create a list and then pick from that list.
Yeah. Siron asks us to make up questions about ourselves, and asks you to make up leading questions about yourself.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't do so, and give guidelines for how to ask your questions, how to make your questions connect to other characters. I would be very interested to play this game with original characters or an original party.
I think that would be really interesting. I also wonder how this game would play, or rather how it would feel with one more act. I felt like I just wanted one more right in the middle. I just wanted
between 2 and 3.
Yeah, between 2 and 3. I just feel like it jumped in the middle of the game. Like the level of desperation just jumped, and one more act I think would have really rounded out the game for me. I just wish I'd had one more opportunity, one more something to kind of get my bearings.
Yes, I really feel like one more act would have helped us get a feel for our characters and understand our characters and understand their interactions. It didn't feel too short. I like the shortness and the compactness of the game. I just feel like just one more round of framed scenes would have given me something new.
I agree.
My last I wonder what would happen if we've already kind of solved. It was I wonder what would happen if we tried to make this game lean into misogyny and religious extremism. And I'm pretty happy with our...
Just change the question you're answering.
Yeah, just change the question to which, because that makes it ambiguous as to whether or not she actually caused the plague, and allows you to explore that a little more while still making the men who are killing her monsters.
I just had a thought. What if you kept the question the same, but instead of the plague, it was smallpox, and then you were that lady who was the cook who gave everybody...
That was not Typhoid Mary?
That's what I'm thinking of.
The one with the word typhoid in her name?
I couldn't remember what her nickname was. What if that was the deal? Instead of the plague, it was typhoid.
Well, Typhoid Mary also legitimately caused typhoid.
Yes, but she wasn't a witch. I don't know. I'm trying. I'm trying.
No, I mean, I just think that by making her a witch, you can play up the creepiness. You can play up the characters feeling very justified in their actions without making their actions excusable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They can feel justified, but we as players can still feel that, hey, this was terrible. This is messed up that we did this.
Right.
Because we don't actually know in the end whether or not she caused the plague.
Yeah.
And maybe she even believes she caused the plague or whatever, but we as players won't know. Just because she's practicing witchcraft doesn't mean that she caused the plague.
Yeah.
I just feel very uncomfortable with making people who burned a woman alive
heroes.
Yeah. And that's basically what this game does when she's guilty.
Yeah, that's true. But I fixed that problem for you.
You did fix that problem for me.
You're good.
Our last segment is Return with the Elixir. This is where we talk about other movies, games, and media that inspire or also explore these ideas in a similar or different way. So, Diana, what is your first one?
So, there was a show on TV called Witches of East End. I think there was a movie by the same name, but I'm talking about the 2013-2014 TV series with, I forget her name, but it was Channing Tatum's wife. I should know her name. I feel bad now because she has her own identity outside of that. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, the TV show was about these witches who were born. They were born and reborn again over and over again. And they kept dying because people kept finding out that they were witches and burning them or crucifying them. They were persecuted their entire lives, plural. And that's really the connection. That's really the only connection between Witch the Road to Lindisfarne and Witches of East End. But I just liked that show and I'd go and watch it. Witches of East End.
Okay.
It was bad, but it was good.
My first is Season of the Witch, a Nicolas Cage movie about Teutonic knights transporting a girl accused of witchcraft to her execution. It's listed in the Appendix N of Witch the Road to Lindisfarne, which makes a lot of sense because they're very similar stories.
Yep.
I have not personally seen Season of the Witch, but I think it is an important enough one, especially as it's listed in the Appendix N, that if you're thinking if this is a game you might want to play or a story you might want to tell, but you're maybe not sure or you don't know how it would look, I think that movie is probably going to give you a pretty good idea. I, as someone who does not like Nicolas Cage...
Love Nicolas Cage.
I know you do. To my understanding, this is a horror film.
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
No?
No. If this were Keanu Reeves, I would jump on it.
Maybe.
I would jump on it, but it's Nicolas Cage, so no. I don't love him that much.
There was the recent Nicolas Cage horror movie, Mandy?
Yeah, the one about the 70s. It was creepy.
Yeah.
The trailer freaked me out.
One day I'll get you to watch. Nope. Yeah, it was Mandy. Mm-mm. Yeah, we'll watch it.
Nope.
Do you have another one?
I do. This one's really random.
Is it?
Yes. Well, yes.
Is it the one I'm looking at?
No, because I'm changing the order.
Okay.
So this one is a bit of a stretch, but it's really about the topic, like what this game explores. So Lucifer, the TV show, has a character, Dan Espinosa, who starts doing improv theater as a way to deal with his frustrations and conflicts with Lucifer Morningstar. And I just thought that was a really nice parallel to what this game does. It uses improv to explore party conflict, and Dan Espinosa and Lucifer Morningstar are in every single episode of Lucifer. So there's some party conflict there for you. Also watch Lucifer. It's quite good. Tom Ellis is attractive. And it's moving to Netflix, so it's going to get dark. So
since we are talking about conflict, I will move to a couple of games that I thought do party conflict quite well. The ones that I wanted to specifically call out are The King is Dead or its sci-fi equivalent Firebrands by Vincent and Mackay Baker. These are two story games in which the characters are all outwardly against one another. And I haven't played the revised rules of The King is Dead. I played the old Patreon rules, but I love that game. These are games where, at least in The King is Dead, which I'm more familiar with, you are playing as knights who are serving a royal house, very similar to Game of Thrones, and you are fighting for to rule the land, and you're fighting for influence, and there's all kinds of different mini games. It's very Mario Party-esque, in which you're playing these mini games, competing for glory and influence, and pitting yourselves against one another, while also framing these scenes where you can have romantic scenes. You can have like a dance, like a ballroom dance, or a roll in the hay, and then a duel. And it just works really well. Another game that does party conflict that I've been wanting to get to the table forever and have not had the chance to yet is Witness the Murder of Your Father and Be Ashamed, Young Prince by Nathan D. Paoletta. This is a game for 3 to 6 players about, well, exactly what the title is. You are a prince, your father has been murdered, and you are trying to figure out which of your brothers did it. I've read the rules and a long time ago, and it sounds fantastic. And it's all about, trying to figure out which of your brothers did it and possibly pin the murder on them.
Yeah.
Another excellent use of conflict, I think.
The only other thing I could think of was the Crucible. So
is that the extent of your witch persecution?
I read romance novels. They always survive because they have to bone later. The thing is, this is not a topic I shy away from.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a topic I seek out, but it's not a topic I shy away from. I could not think of anything. I am sure I have.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if people tweet at us about some stuff that I'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Oh yeah, I should have thought of that. But I thought of those 3 things and 2 of them are completely and totally random that no one else would have the context for.
For Lucifer?
That I made the connection to Dan Espinosa. That is a very specific connection that I've made.
No, I 100% agree. The Crucible, anything dealing with the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
I teased you, but I can't remember the name of any of the books I read about the Salem witch trials now. Anything dealing with that period in history about puritanical persecution is for sure going to be helpful and useful in this game.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you thought of?
Yes. My last one I want to touch on is Fall of Magic by Ross Cowman. This is another kind of travelogue vignette game where you are moving your figures across a map and telling stories based on the prompts. So you're presenting scenes, you're acting out those scenes as you go from one end of the map to another. Fall of Magic is much longer. It is not horror. It's very whimsical or sad fantasy, depending on how you play it. Our games always end up being super sad.
Yeah.
But it's a fantasy game about magic in the world is dying, and the magus is dying with it. And that is pretty much all you have to go off of as you travel with the magus to the end. Framing scenes, presenting moments and vignettes and narrative. It's an excellent game that has a very similar structure, if not having that conflict or the same sort of tense ending.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Dinah, what is a story you'd like to tell with this game?
I know you hate it when people break games, but I want to break this game.
Okay.
I want to play this game with a party of 8. I want to play it with a much larger party.
It is not that I hate when people break games. I mean, we have a section in this called I Wonder What Would Happen If.
Right.
I don't like it when people don't play in the spirit of a game.
Okay, that's true. All 8 of us would play in the spirit of this game.
That is a big party. Why do you want such a big party?
Because I think it would be interesting. I think those dynamics would, I know those dynamics would be so much more complicated. And I feel like it would be richer. And that might be really naive of me to think that. But this game is so easy to pick up and play. And you can change it would obviously be longer than 2.5 hours if you played with 8 people. But I just feel like it would be a cool... This is going to be so messed up. I feel like it would be a cool dinner party game after you've eaten. I know that's messed up because it is a horror. I know it's a horror game. But I just want to play with a bigger party. I feel like it would be interesting. Because real talk, if you're transporting a witch, you wouldn't have 3 people. Yeah. You'd have a bigger party.
Yeah.
And I think it would be interesting especially for Eloise, to play all of us off of each other.
Yeah.
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 You're looking at your face.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think having a larger party might help everyone develop their characters instead of having an extra act.
Yeah.
Because if you're incorporating everybody into each other's scenes, now you suddenly have 8 scenes. That just feels like so much.
I mean, maybe 8's too much. Maybe you should just play with the 6 that you could play with.
We would need to try it with 6 first.
But I just feel like go big or go home, man. Go big or go home.
I would be interested in hearing how that would go.
Yeah.
For me, this game is so highly specialized to one specific story. I just want to play it again, is the story I want to tell. It is a highly specialized story. I want to see what else I can do within the confines that it is giving me and just mess with these characters. Yeah. We have these prompts. We have these leading questions. I just want to toy with them and twist them and fiddle with them more. Other than having more experience with this game, I don't know what story I want to tell. Other than now I want to tell a story in which we don't know if witchcraft is the cause of the Black Plague.
Yeah.
Explicitly. Like, we go into the game knowing that.
Right. Yeah, I don't think you can tell a different story. Like, even my thing's not really a different story. It's a different way of playing the game.
Yeah. I for sure want to play this game again to see what new, different story I can tell within its confines.
Right.
And I'm not sure how to do that, but I want to try.
We probably start with the monk not being a Satan worshiper.
Yeah.
That might help.
Just right off the bat, you're not allowed to worship Satan.
Immediately.
Hey, Brother Armand, you're a God-fearing man of the cloth.
Or you have a secret love child and you're super corrupt, but you don't believe in the devil. I don't know.
The Farrier's Bellows is a production of The Gauntlet. You can find us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. You can find us on our website at gauntlet-rpg.com, and we are on Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet, where you can contribute to The Gauntlet and support more great shows like ours.
Thanks to our editor, Zach B. Also, you can find us on iTunes. Please rate and subscribe to us. We would really appreciate it.
Please follow us on Twitter at Farrier's Bellows. Talk to us and talk about us. We would love to hear your thoughts on the show and on this game. You can find me personally on Twitter at ZWGarth.
And me at ICDiana. Until next time, you cannot dream yourself into a character. You must hammer and forge yourself one.
Remember that there is none righteous. No, not one.